Hi there, friends, and welcome to Red Eyes Radio. My name is Henrik. Thank you very much for tuning in today, spending some of your time with us today as we highlight what we consider to be some of the most interesting and important topics that there is to focus on and study. Our website is redeyescreations.com. Go there if you want to hear more radio. We have a year of radio available for free for you on our website. If you want more, you can always sign up for a membership to our website. We have programs going back to 2006, extended interviews with many of our guests. We also have webcasts, films, and video interviews available there for you. And today we are going to spend some time together with Terry Boardman. He is a UK-based researcher and author of Mapping the Millennium, Behind the Plans of the New World Order. Terry is also one of the speakers at the upcoming AV2 conference, the Alternative View, that is in London, Heathrow, at the end of May. We're coming closer to this event as each day passes, obviously. So if you are interested in attending, you should definitely get on board now for the sake of tickets availability. We from Red Eyes are going to be there, and we hope to see you there as well, of course. There's a lot of great speakers there. Some we've had on the show. You can always go back into our archive and check out some of the recent programs that we've done with them. And the website that you should go for more information about the Alternative View is simply thealternativeview.co.uk for dates, tickets, full list of speakers, and so forth. I also want to mention Terry's website, monju.pwp.blueyonder.co.uk, and this will be linked up on redeyescreations.com for easy access. We're going to spend a little bit of time here today talking about the New World Order, but from a kind of little bit different perspective. We're going to talk about the importance of the 21st century, the new millennium that only is 9 years young, as it were. We're going to talk about the meta picture, the big game, as it were, and it's going to be very interesting hearing more about this from Terry. So with that, welcome to the program, Terry. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Henrik. It's nice to be with you.
Excellent having you here. And I do want to talk a little bit about your background here right at the beginning and introduce you, as it were, to our listeners. Tell us a little bit about when you got involved in this particular area and how long you've been studying it.
Right. Well, I got involved in it really towards the end of the 80s, I would say. But perhaps if you just allow me, maybe I just spend a couple of minutes building up to that so I can put this interest, how this interest arose in a biographical context. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Because I'm coming from the west of England, and I was born. However, that's the boundary between Wales and England, so Anglo-Celtic background in my family also. And I was born in Wales at the south, and I was brought up of the border, and I was brought up in Chester, the north of the border. And that's interesting because these are two of the three places that had Roman legions 2,000 years ago. There were 3 Roman bases in Chester, and 2 of them were in the places where I was born and brought up. And the place where I was brought up, Chester, which means camp, Roman camp. This is a very, very historical city. It goes back to 79 AD. And one is very much aware, I was aware as a kid, brought up in the late 50s, early 60s, of the history of the place. So that's just to flag that up first of all. Very, very strong connection there with Rome, you might say. And then because I had TV from very early on in my childhood, and in those days television was very Americanized in Britain. So I used to watch a lot of TV as a kid, and around about the age of 8, I used to watch, for example, quite a few war films, and I became very struck by the fact that the way that the Germans and the Japanese and also the Red Indians in these films were not treated fairly. They were treated as some subhuman or as, not rather stupid.
Yes.
And this had an effect on me already as a child. So I was about 8 then, and that was the beginnings of my interest in history. And then just coming forward a little bit, round about when I was 11, I was very much into Tolkien then. Your listeners will probably know about the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and all of this.
Yes.
And about the same time, I also went on my first foreign trip. It was a school trip to Austria. And that period was the beginnings of my interest in the First World War, not the Second, which is perhaps a little bit strange because being born only 7 years after the Second World War, England in those days was very much awash, you might say, with memories of the Second World War. It was very close. And we still had a movie industry in those days in England with lots of war movies. But no, I was interested in the First World War because I had family connections which went back to then. And so that time, the BBC also made a 50-year retrospective of the First World War, a very long series, which was like a new world opening to me. So I had 3 new worlds opening to me at that time. One was Tolkien, one was Austria, and the First World War. And then a fourth one, which is also again through TV, was the samurai. I saw this film, the Seven Samurai, of the famous Japanese director Kurosawa, and that was another completely different world which opened up. So these are the beginnings of my interest, you see, in what you might call the German-speaking world and the Japanese world. Then I went on to do karate later on when I was a teenager, and then eventually after university I went to Japan. And I spent 7 years in Japan as a language teacher. And that was really perhaps the most formative experience certainly in the first part of my life until now. What Japan taught me, various personal qualities it taught me, but from the point of view perhaps of our theme today, one of the things it taught me, which I think is very important, is to become aware of one's national conditioning. And to become aware of also how one's thought processes operate. And the national conditioning element, if I may just give you an example of that,
please,
is that, for example, we in Britain here, we live on an island, obviously, and we're sort of educated almost subconsciously from early childhood to think that we're individuals, you see. And so I have my personality, I have my individuality. And so then I noticed fairly soon after I went to Japan, and they would ask me questions, all kinds of people, from university professors to taxi drivers, whoever it would be. And they would say, well, things like this: we in Japan think such and such. What do you in England think about that?
Right.
Yeah. And I would always reply, well, there are 55 million of us.
Yep.
I can't speak for them. I think this such and such, you see. I'm sure you as a European can also understand such a point of view. I mean, it's fairly typical in the West, yeah?
Absolutely.
As a whole. But it took me, Henrik, about 2 years almost to be in Japan before the penny dropped, as we say in English, which is that for the Japanese people, and this was the early 70s, remember, this consciousness that we think in this way was a reality. So I began slowly to realize that I myself had been formed by my society to have this view that I was a personality and I could only speak for myself, and I was almost isolated, you might say. Whereas they felt themselves to be strongly a community, and a community that shared certain values and beliefs and thoughts. So that was a very important lesson, because when I came back to England later on very briefly in the 70s, but especially in the early 80s, I realized, talking to my friends and looking at the media and so on, that there were all kinds of prejudices and habits and customs of thinking which the English actually had and shared, but which they were not aware of because they thought of themselves as individuals. Whereas in fact, they were often looked at things in a very equally collective manner. It's just it just wasn't so conscious for them as it was for the Japanese, paradoxically.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, then I came back really with 3 questions from Japan, because it's such a very different culture, you know, that obviously it's got all the technology that we have and more. And yet that's, in a certain sense, at that time in particular, was on the surface. And underneath was a way of thinking and acting which is very, very different from the West. Many people have noted this, yeah. But I explored all sorts of things in Japan. And I came back from there with three questions, really, because I was really trying, out of my interest in history, to understand this tremendous dissonance or polarity between the Far East and the West. It seemed to me that there was no way to bridge. And I asked all kinds of, came into all sort of different spiritual streams, for example, in the East, and also read a lot. And I couldn't find there any satisfactory answers to the question of, well, what then is the West? Do you see?
Yeah.
That the representatives of Japanese spirituality would say very politely, well, the West has actually been a mistake. The entire evolution and history of the West has been a mistake. And in order for you to become healthy again, you have to become like us. And I somehow knew in my guts, knew in my bones that this was not right.
Yeah.
But because I'd had, like many young people, a superficial Christian upbringing, and like many young people also in the West, I'd rejected Christianity about the age of 18 and not bothered to think much more about it. I suddenly, after being in Japan about 7 years, this question of Christianity and the other things that differentiated the West from Japan, such as why was it the West that developed natural science and the Far East did not? Why was it that the West did not develop the idea or live with the concept of reincarnation, and the Far East did? Questions like this. And those are really, Henrik, the three big questions I had. Why doesn't Western science investigate pre-birth and after-death experiences? Yeah?
Yeah.
In other words, why is there no reincarnation in the West?
Right.
And of course, it's just been starting, one could say, particularly since the 1960s. But still, nevertheless, in the general culture of the West, reincarnation has not yet put down, one could say, deep roots. So why was that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
And I was just going to. The other questions were, what then is Christianity? Because I realized I didn't understand it.
All right. Yeah.
And what is natural science? Those are the three questions I came back with. And having not found any answers to those questions in Japan, I came back to we were living in London at that time. And very, very soon after coming back, that's where I came across the work of Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy. And that struck me as very interesting because here I could see some answers to these questions. So. And
would you, exactly. And if you will share with us a little bit about what you found then, because on the surface level, as you talk about this, to me, I've always felt that in a kind of, I guess, a little bit superficial way, but the East for me has always represented more of the internal, and the West has always represented the external, meaning that we go into the material stuff, the hard science, as it were, as you described. We're interested in the external world, while the East has focused much more on the spiritual things and the internal world. And I guess what you're also describing here as well then is how do we put these two together? How do we balance these two sides that actually have been at war with each other and in going against each other, as it were?
Yes, indeed. And one could say that, in a very, perhaps a somewhat superficial way, but there is a certain truth to it, that there is a kind of very large-scale yin-yang between the East and the West, in the sense that you've just outlined, this internal and external. But I think there is a sense that amongst people both in the East and in the West, some people who wish to perpetuate this yin-yang, if you will, into something fixed. So that when it comes to anything of a spiritual nature, we must only look to the East. And when it comes to anything of a technological nature, well, then the West will have the solutions. Mm-hmm. I had come to feel that from my experience in Japan that this was no longer a way to see things. And I'd long had my doubts about it. And as I got further into Steiner's work, for example,